Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface, but if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast. That's Ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode. Welcome, dear listeners, to our series of short haunts. A shot of scary, just for you. So grab a hot chocolate, maybe a tea, maybe something stronger, because this is Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts. It's not just a board game. Stories of interactions with the Ouija boards are a fascinating topic of the paranormal. The use of these boards as a method of talking to spirits beyond the veil continues to divide opinion among skeptics and believers alike, yet their attraction to many still holds strong. A good deal of people will use an Ouija board and have little to no strange experiences at all, but for others, it's a whole different story. Talking boards have been around since the late 1800s and were a common tool for practitioners of the spiritualist movement. But it wasn't really until around 1890 that the Ouija board came into proper existence. Very similar to a talking board, the Ouija board was marketed as a parlor game, and the games company Hasbro still owns the trademark even today. Brushing aside the details of how this innocent-looking board came into existence, the Ouija board holds an air of fear and mystery about it. Can it really be a tool used to open the door so that we can speak to the dead? Many believe it is, and whilst the high majority of experiences with these boards are tame, leisurely, and not of much concern, there are a small minority which are very disturbing, frightening, even otherworldly. Because it's not just the dead that can be channeled through these boards as many believe. Other things. Dangerous entities, elementals, spirits who are tricksters and are evil can also be brought from their world into ours by using these items, especially if you don't really know what you're dealing with. This short haunt is a story which revolves around a young girl and the obsessions she developed with an Ouija board, which belonged to her parents. You'll hear of the many strange things that happened as our listener's relationship with the board grew deeper and deeper, even to the point of affecting others around her. So, let's hand this over to our listener and let her take it from here. I discovered your podcast a few months ago and have been binging every single episode. It's absolutely my favorite thing to listen to. and I can't wait to listen to all your future episodes. I wanted to write into the show to share my story and to maybe have my experiences serve as a warning. My name is Xanthe, and I grew up in Canada in a tiny fishing town called Steveston, in British Columbia to be exact. Growing up, my parents were always into the spookier side of life. While my mum collects mourning jewellery, taxidermy, and is currently an oracle card reader, my dad loves everything horror and has a large collection of antique clocks and Ouija boards. As a child, I was always intrigued by my parents' interests, and I found it hilarious when I would invite my friends over. They would all be incredibly weirded out by my parents' interests and their unique interior design choices. At 10 years old, I spent my nights watching horror movies with my dad and asking my mum to tell me all of her ghost stories. My mother has always been very sensitive to the paranormal and supernatural, and has spent her entire childhood and adult life witnessing a large number of accounts. But moreover, I was always intrigued by my father's large collection of Ouija boards on the shelf, and I would beg my parents to let me use one, but they would always say the same thing to me: another day. On my 11th birthday, I had a party, and once again begged my parents to let me and my friends play with an Ouija board. At this point, I'd probably asked them a million times, so they most likely agreed just to keep me quiet. They selected a board and sat me and a number of friends down. They then explained the rules and handed the board over to us so that we could use it for the night. My 3 friends and I all listened closely to the instructions my parents had given to us and squirreled ourselves away to begin our new adventure. We selected a suitable space, placed the board down, and all sat around it. Each one of us then placed 2 fingers on the planchette. Then we asked the obvious question first: "Is anyone there?" Almost immediately, the planchette slid over to the word yes. Of course, being just 11 years old, we all blamed each other for moving the planchette, but none of us would admit to it. We all swore that it wasn't us moving it. We spent the next 2 hours asking various questions, all of us completely intrigued, but never really scared. We eventually said goodbye to the Ouija board just as my parents had instructed us, and all went to sleep in my bedroom. The next morning, I remember being the first one to wake up, while my 3 friends were all still fast asleep, scattered across my bedroom floor. All of a sudden, I heard loud, slow footsteps coming from down the hallway. It sounded as if a large man wearing heavy work boots was walking past. I found this very, very strange, as my dad didn't allow any shoes to be worn in the house. The footsteps continued down the hallway and stopped right in front of my closed door. There was a small gap in between my door and the floor, and there, as clear as day, was the definite shadow of a man cast on the floor, as well as the tips of his boots. I assumed it was my dad trying to scare us, so I whispered to him to leave us alone.
"Leave us alone,"
because everyone else was still asleep. There was no response, and no movement from the man on the other side of my bedroom door. My dad couldn't have heard me, so I said again, a bit louder this time,
"Dad, go away. Everyone's still asleep."
The man still didn't move, and by now I was getting quite frustrated with him, so I quickly opened my door to find nobody there. Confused, I decided to go to my parents' bedroom to ask my dad what he wanted, but chillingly, my parents weren't even home. There was nobody in the house besides me and my 3 friends, who were still fast asleep. While this strange and weird experience stuck in my mind, nothing else strange happened for the rest of that day. My 3 friends went home, and I invited my cousin over that night. Once again, I begged my parents to let us use the Ouija board and they agreed. My cousin and I spent the next few hours playing with the board, becoming more and more intrigued by what was happening. As with the experience during the previous night with my 3 friends, we weren't frightened at all, but things slowly began to get out of control. These 2 initial experiences which I'd had with the board somehow began to suck me into a life of doing nothing else but using the Ouija board. Over the next year and a bit, my whole existence would revolve around me coming home from school and using the Ouija board for hours and hours. I would ask more and more questions, spending more and more time with the board, and it wasn't long before things began to get very creepy. I remember making friends with some of the spirits that would come through and make contact while I was using the board. Was this just my imagination, taking imaginary friends a bit too far? Was it just another outlet used for my creativity? Or was there something more to it? Eventually, it seemed as if I couldn't escape playing with the board. If my parents didn't let me use it, I would get upset and angry with them. I was struggling to do my homework, struggling to focus on schoolwork, struggling with normality. I was so enthralled with this board. At one point, I even began playing physical games with it. My favorite was the game of hide and seek, where I'd ask the board to give me something to find. Now, as most of you probably think, it must have been my wild imagination forming this strange bond with the Ouija board, and my own wild imagination that was creating these conversations and games. But the weird thing was, the board was asking me to find things that I didn't even know existed in our house. An example of this game was when the board asked me to find orange chocolate. It turned out that there was a bottle of orange chocolate wine hidden at the back of my parents' snack cupboard. One of the strangest incidents that this game threw up was when it asked me to find a black bead on a white lamp. Now, I didn't even know we had a white lamp in our house, but as determined as I was, when playing this game, I spent what seemed like hours looking everywhere. I was having no luck at all and nearly gave up until I asked my parents if we had a white lamp. Sure enough, they led me downstairs, and there, on the top shelf of this tiny storage cupboard, was a small white lamp on a white scooped base. I took a closer look, and to my surprise, there was a tiny, loose black bead sitting right on the scooped base. The board had been right. Yet again. Now, maybe I was making all of this up in my head, and maybe I'd seen these items long ago and mentally took notes, although I can't seem to convince myself that this is what happened. Nothing seemed to make sense, apart from one thing, that somehow the board knew we had these items. A few years later, we moved out of that house, and out of nowhere, my mum asked me to never touch an Ouija board again, especially in our new house. By this time, I'd already grown out of that phase of my life, so I wasn't too bothered by this new rule. I didn't think anything of it for a few years until I was maybe 16 or 17 years old. Out of curiosity, I asked my mum why she'd suddenly said no more to using Ouija boards. She told me that ever since I'd begun playing with the board, she began experiencing strange things around the house. At first, she just began hearing unexplainable sounds, but then she began seeing small goblin-like creatures hobbling around in the corners, and these are her words. She also told me that she often saw them out of the corner of her eye, that they were small and always crouched over. This went on for the rest of the time that we lived in that house, but this wasn't the end of the strange incidents. My mum had accidentally locked herself outside on the deck while my baby brother was inside in his high chair. She was feeding him and walked onto the balcony to throw an empty canister away, when all of a sudden, the door slammed shut. Behind her, and locked. She began pounding on the door,
"Let me in!"
yelling at me to let her in. But being the angsty teen that I was at the time, I was in my bedroom blasting music, so I didn't hear anything. In that house, there was a window on the deck door that looked into the kitchen. That kitchen had 2 arches, one that led into the hallway and one that led into the living room. So from where my mum was standing, she could see my brother in the kitchen. But she could also see into the living room, as well as getting a glimpse into the hallway. As she was pounding on the door, she saw a tall man walk from the living room and down the hallway. Thinking it was my dad, she started yelling at him to be let back in. In her stress and anger, she managed to pick the lock and ran inside to make sure my baby brother was okay. To my mother's huge relief, he was perfectly happy. So, she then stormed down the hallway to scold my dad for ignoring her. But to her surprise, my dad wasn't even at home. His car wasn't in the driveway because he was still at work. She then came into my room, presumably to scold me for ignoring her. But instead of launching into reading me the riot act, she suddenly paused and her face went completely pale. Concerned, I asked her what was wrong, but she just didn't say anything for what seemed like ages. Until all of a sudden, looking puzzled, she simply said,
"That man had no head."
And then walked out of my room. Did my Ouija board fanatics accidentally create some type of portal into my home? Did it cause my mum to be more sensitive to the energies around us? Or was it all just in our heads? I now happily live in Scotland, and I'm always trying to find new places to visit that supposedly have lots of paranormal activity. Personally, I haven't had any more experiences similar to these as of yet, but your podcast has given me lots of new places to visit, and for that, I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much again. Best regards, Xanthe Kitson. And that is where this short haunt ends, but it's also where the questions begin. What did Xanthe actually contact via that Ouija board? And was it the same entity from the very beginning? Had she unwittingly let something from another spiritual dimension into our world, and once it was there, was it able to appear to others in different forms? The man in the heavy boots, the friends who Xanthe was communicating with, and the terrifying apparition which was encountered by her mother. As stated at the start of this short haunt, the Ouija board continues and will always continue to divide opinion as to its alleged powers. However, there are those out there who will swear that their experiences were real. And 9 times out of 10, those same people will warn you to never touch an Ouija board. Because if you do, and you end up bringing something through the veil of that strange world beyond, the next person who could be telling their story as a short haunt could be you.